Attention. Attention.
The live broadcast you have tuned into is a pre-recorded episode of the Dudes and Beer podcast. Dudes and Beer is presently traveling the vast void of time and space in an effort to find you more of the best content in the known universe. Enjoy the following transmission, and remember, if you can't be good at it.
Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome once again to the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host, and I am on the road this week with longtime friend and friend of the podcast, Pops Davis, as well as Sue Mariani. We're here to talk about Susan Mariani, to talk about her book, House Guests and Ghosts, Very True Stories of the Paranormal. This is a topic that we hold near and dear to our hearts here at Dudes and Beer. We talk about the paranormal frequently on the show. What in your life, Susan, brought you to understand the paranormal in the way that you do, and how do you define paranormal? Because everybody, sure, it's something outside of the realm of the normal, but it means different things to different people. So
I was going to say, normal is one of those objective words.
Yeah.
Anything that can't be explained scientifically, things that are my faith. I think my faith was the primary crux of my belief in the paranormal. And I think in the opening of my book, that's what I bring up, people that tell me they don't believe in ghosts. And these are real stories from real people. There's actually emails direct from people who've had these events happen to them that they could not explain and people around them couldn't explain.
Yeah.
So I say, if you pray, you believe in a spiritual world coexisting with our own. And they're around us all the time. That's what I've come to believe. They talk to me sometimes, usually in my dreams. I don't want to come across as being like this crazy lady. People that know me.
That's all right.
That's all right. I'm a crazy lady.
Well, crazy in the best way.
Long Island media.
Crazy.
Whatever.
Crazy in the best way. It is hard. And I've definitely come to terms with the fact that most people that I've found that don't believe in it, because much like religion is a matter of faith. I mean, you have to be willing to, like I was telling you in conversation earlier, it's the ultimate test of self and of self-realization, because it requires surrender of yourself. Correct. It requires you to actually surrender yourself into a way of thinking that is not normal. In and of itself, the whole concept of religion is paranormal. It is connection with the divine. It is connection with something outside of yourself.
Exactly.
So, and something greater than yourself, to put it into the terms of the big book. And
even if you look at programs where there's not religion involved with ancient aliens, there is something out there. Science has proven that there are other organisms in this vast universe that are not ours. And a lot of people say that's a contradiction of Catholic theology, which it's not. To me,
well,
it's just
not
the
to
more
the
you
church
get,
either.
No, the more you get to know him, the more you realize just how incredibly omnipotent he is.
Well, and it's the fact that, like I was saying, it's the fact of you've got to believe in something that is fairly unfathomable, and I got into it a lot with my classes whenever I taught about the Trinity, because it's a complex concept, and it's hard to understand, and it's hard to explain, and it is one of those things that it's an intrinsic part of the Catholic faith, but once again, faith. That's where it comes in. You have to believe in something, and it calls you to believe in something. And even the paranormal calls you to believe in something, or at least suspend your disbelief. To at least suspend your disbelief that this realm of thinking isn't possible. That what you're talking, if you dismiss it outright, how are you going to scientifically even have an open mind to discuss it?
Well, if you look into physics or quantum physics and you discuss those dark matter and parallel universe and these things,
string theory and strange energies,
exactly, and there's and dark energies now, and there's so many things that scientists are uncovering now that would be considered heresy. Just a few years ago, that they're not heretical at all. To me, it shows the omnipotence of God. And the
science to us is magic to somebody 100 years ago. If I went back to the Civil War with an M16 machine gun, I alone would win the Civil War. Me and my one-man army would win that war, dude.
You do in your mind all the time,
fighting against unrifled muskets and stuff like that. I would win that war.
That's
like
right.
This one-man army would win.
A god.
Exactly. If you went back to the time of ancient Greece with a Zippo, man,
that's what they etched into stone,
you would be
5,000 years ago.
You would be driven out of the village. With stones, be given up to Poseidon.
He's a wizard.
Yeah,
he's a wizard.
And that's just it. Science to us is magic to those 500 years ago.
And so that really is, the book is more conceptual. Although I've been told it's a really fun read, it's a good read. I leave a sense of humor.
The little bit that I've gotten to read just since I've been here has been very enjoyable.
Why, thank you.
I thumbed through at the beginning just to kind of check out, as I tend to do, to check out the foreword and to check out the chapters, the chapter names. Because chapter names, to me as a musician at least, the way I write music and movements, will tell me the story, at least in my mind, of at least the general journey of what I'm going to be taking before I even read the back of the book. Before I get somebody's interpretation.
From some great writers, Gary Jansen being one, Daryl Cossey another, Joanne Holt. There's so many people I have to thank for getting me through this book, including Steve here, prodding me when I didn't want to be prodded.
And I remember before the book was, I was so impressed whenever he brought it around the corner tonight. I was like, oh my God, I'm holding a copy of the book. I can't believe this. As many times as we've talked on the phone and conceptualized this and put it out into the universe, I am holding a physical copy of her book.
And I was very impressed with Amazon's cover. Didn't they do a great job?
They did a fantastic job.
I am very impressed with the way they did my book. And promoting it. It started with my son's imaginary friend. That's why it took 16 years to write. Because for years I didn't believe he had an imaginary friend.
All right.
And
let's go into that, because I'm a big believer in imaginary friends.
Do you have several?
I had one when I was a kid. Yeah.
Did you?
But it's also one of those. I encourage it. I'm okay with it. Yeah. I'm okay with it. And I was kind of disturbed when they took Snuffleupagus away from Big Bird for a little while. Snuffleupagus is bad because Snuffleupagus was an imaginary friend. Big Bird was the only person on Sesame Street that could see her.
So is the current show Happy? Isn't that what that's about?
Yeah. But this was a kid's show. I mean, they also changed one of these things just don't belong. It's now one of these things is so unique. And hey, sorry, sometimes things just don't belong.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact. It's a hard fact, but yeah, they've kind of gone with these different things over the years now.
And yet Barney is a completely imaginary person, and he's taken the world by storm.
Well, no, all those kids can see Barney. That's the thing.
The children can see Barney, but adults can't.
No.
So he is, in fact, an imaginary friend. He's a figment of the children's imagination. And there's nothing wrong with imagination. I think a great deal problem we have in society today, we've got kids that are so infatuated with electronics and games on television and television shows, television in general, that there's not enough time used for creativity and imagination.
That's right.
And just get out and playing in a sandbox. I read one time.
Play with the stick, kid.
Right. Einstein used
my
to love to sit at the playground and watch the kids, and he was inspired by that.
Yeah.
My autistic son Paul is an inspiration to me so many times because he can see things that we can't see, and he's dealing on a different mental realm than the rest of us are dealing on.
Well, and we've talked about that all day. It's literally it's a different way of processing data. It's a different way of seeing reality to begin with. Mm-hmm. And like I said, to imagine seeing the world with zero pretense. Zero pretense.
Isn't that what we all strive to do?
Approaching everybody as a blank slate.
Yeah.
No pretense about what they're wearing. No pretense about how they smell. You know, that's it. Yeah, like you said, that's what we're all called to do, technically,
exactly
by any religion the whole world over, whether it's Hopi Indian,
that's
exactly
right. And I bring
every
up
one of them.
the world religions, even though, and I wanted to let people know, yes, I'm writing from a Catholic perspective, but
which is odd. Which is odd, quite honestly, folks. You aren't going to find a whole lot of people writing a book on the paranormal from the Catholic perspective, mainly because the Catholic Church doesn't really teach a whole lot about the paranormal.
And yet,
granted, they've reopened the College of Exorcism, which is great.
1990s, wasn't it? Help me out here, because I'm not good with dates. This is where I want to call my sister Mary Jane. She is my go-to.
What are you looking for?
I am looking for when the Catholic Church had their renewed rite of exorcism, which I don't believe anything was changed, and I do believe it was under John Paul II.
It was changed to
papacy.
English. It was translated fully to English.
Well,
there
I know
is
that
no
John
longer.
Paul II wanted an exorcist in every diocese.
Yes, he wanted that back
in the United States, because there really is, and it's one thing that the Catholics have always taught. There is that battle for the soul between good and evil. It has always.
Sorry to
been
get
there.
religious and deep on y'all folks, but
we get much
this is where but I mean this is where the tip of the iceberg of the paranormal is, you know, and what it, like I said, as I was thumbing through, the chapter that I stopped on was chapter 12. Which is the chapter about exorcism,
exercising exorcism,
and I spent a lot of time in my religious studies, even after the seminary, things like that, studying about the rite of exorcism and studying the history of exorcism in the church, because I wanted to understand it. And you want to read a frightening book? Go read "Hostage to the Devil" by Father Malachi Martin.
Read it. Didn't sleep for months.
Yeah,
and it was actually recommended to me. Yeah, and that's in the book. Now I didn't bring up that particular book because of copyright infringement and all sorts of other things.
You know, there's been question about him, all kinds of stuff. But yeah.
But in actuality, he did work devoutly
directly for the
eradicate evil in our world. And there are times there have been documented cases where doctors know they're not psychotic, which I understand why they would feel somebody is psychotic.
Especially, and that's just it. And that's what most people don't understand, is that the church adapts itself with modern technology
and science.
In science, we understand the fact that we have brain disease. We understand that we have like brain wasting disease, for crying out loud.
We also understand that
we have syphilis. We have things like, good God, syphilis is on the rise right now. Yeah.
So are all sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, just this week, I hate to be Debbie Downer, but just this week, Zika was transmitted sexually. They found out.
Oh wow,
that's a new one.
It's mutated. Fantastic,
right?
Because
it
was not
isn't
before.
It?
Well, I mean, it's a bloodborne virus, so it makes sense. But
true that.
Yeah, I mean, to get back to the paranormal, it's one of those. It's odd because I've of course in my life had very close connection with many priests, and of course it's an odd road for them to tread to talk about it, because in that big green book, the Catechism, there's not a whole lot about it. They don't really talk about it. To commune with spirits, things like that, is necromancy, and that, of course, according to Leviticus and teachings beyond that, is anathema. You should not be communing with spirits. You shouldn't be attempting to contact spirits. So one thing if you run across them, another thing if you're like doing the medium thing and trying to contact
Correct.
people,
But we contact spirits. I mean, when I get into a devout prayer life, which they have recorded radio brain waves, are high, very high. I believe it was in Lourdes, France, or was it Fatima, Portugal, where they were doing electromagnetic studies on brain waves where people were gathered in a deep, deep sense of prayer.
Yeah.
And they actually monitored that it was higher in those levels. They're transcending to a different realm. And you can do that through meditation, which I pray the rosary, which is a meditative kind of prayer.
It is a mantric prayer.
Yeah, exactly. And it does put you in that separate realm.
Yeah.
Different religions call different things. It's your Zen.
And I mean, it's fully backed up by all science. In my own music, I use entrainment principles where I'm using binaural beats of brainwave patterns to literally entrain your brain to lock into that pattern, whether it be a pattern of being uncomfortable, because I want the music to make you feel uncomfortable, or whether I want it to like relax your muscles and put you to sleep for an hour, or whether I want you to have like more active dreams.
Yeah.
You can absolutely create that by simply exposing the brain to that resonant tone. And it will eventually lock into that.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah.
And with the mantra of the rosary, sometimes I find that after that is when I have the most active paranormal experiences as far as dreams. If you remember, the angel came to St. Joseph in a dream after Mary conceived through the Holy Spirit. And the angel Gabriel appeared to her. She was terrified.
Yeah.
Okay, that was not an evil ghost. And I've had people tell me, ghosts are all evil. If they're here, they're all evil. That's not true. There are very saints that have had locution? They're seen in different spots of the world at the same time.
Not a single spotting of any angel in the Bible did not ring fear.
St. Joseph, they came to him, the wise men in a dream. And
mainly because most of the time, angels were delivering vengeance. They were delivering some pretty horrifying things most of the time.
They were nothing that I want.
It was the angel of death to the ancient Jews that came about during Passover, all that kind of stuff. So
exactly.
It was one of those, like, you greet a stranger with kindness and you bring them into your home, but be wary, they may be an angel. Because when the angel comes, dude, like,
I hate it when that happens.
Crazy stuff happens when the angels come to town, bro. Like, your town may not be there tomorrow.
Put the knives up.
You remember that town Sodom down the road? The angels came there too at the night of the party. Wasn't a party the next day. They were rightfully afraid. Like, most of the time, there was some pretty bad stuff that came about in the wake of the presence of an angel. Be it keeping us away from the Garden of Eden that we couldn't take care of and got kicked out of.
Can't even keep the garden in order.
Can't even keep the garden in order. Just get out, dude.
Pete's sake.
Now I gotta I gotta put a guy on the gate. Great. Uziel, get over there, dude.
Gosh, this wood up.
Get over there.
And then there's
Uziel.
that old adage, they say that if you pray the rosary and you have this devotion to Mary, which somebody recently said on Facebook that we worship Mary, and that is untrue. There's so many misconceptions about the Catholic faith. And we don't worship Mary. We pray for her intercession.
Absolutely.
And there's
I pray for my grandfather's intercession with my son.
Absolutely.
Like, guide me, man.
Absolutely. And that's one thing I bring up in the book. Heck yeah, my mom's come to visit me. Steve's...
I want to jump in here.
Go ahead, Steve.
Bit. Sue and I have known each other for a long time. And my late wife, Patty, and Sue were great friends. Great friends. did a lot together. Always had each other's back, and I didn't really get to know Sue till after Patty passed, more or less. I mean, other than, oh, hi Sue, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. I'm working now, you know, that kind of deal. So, but when Patty passed away, a week after, I get a call from Sue. I want to talk to Patty. She's not answering her phone, or this, that, and the other. I said, you know, Patty passed. And Sue just started helping me in the ton and overwhelming things that were coming to pass in my life, and I just needed help.
Yeah.
And Sue came and helped. But one things that stands out to me so intrinsically about Sue's ability to communicate, have communications of some sort with the paranormal, the other side. I was desperately looking for a piece of paper, and Patty was a paper person. She had literally bales. I mean, you could
she
make
never threw anything
bales of paper.
She's like me.
In her, and of course, everything was meticulous, and I never had anything to do with the paperwork because that wasn't my bailiwick.
Yeah,
she runs the paper. I do the
this
other.
guy.
So I'm trying to sell the house. I think is what.
Yeah, you were trying to sell the house, and you need this paperwork in order to make that happen.
And in order for that to happen, I had absolutely no clue where it might have been in, 30, 40 type boxes, file boxes. And I told you, I'm screwed if that is. Yeah. And of course, there's so many things going on at the same time. It was just overwhelming. Well, Sue left and came back the next day. She said, well, Patty came to me in a dream last night. Your paper that you're looking for is in your medical file. What?
She was laughing when she told me.
Yeah.
And what did she tell you?
She said, it's in his medical file. And I remember that laugh of hers so distinctly. And I'm like, why the hell did you put in his medical file? And she said, because I figured he'd go to the doctor before he sold the house. So she was expecting you to look in your medical file at some point, knowing you had your surgery
long
on your
before you
eyes.
would be looking for the actual deed.
Well, he had just had surgery on his eyes. She knew he would be going to the doctor, putting things in his medical file. And I'm like, okay. So I get up from my little siesta and I go over to the medical file and I'm like, there it is. That really was her. Because in my mind, I was like, okay, so I had this dream about Patty. It's my subconscious mind. And it's about the paperwork because it's been programmed into my head because of what he talked about. I'm trying to find a scientific, psychological reason, medical reason why I had this dream. But then when I went to the medical file, it was really there.
Yeah.
I couldn't explain that. I couldn't explain that except to say she told me to look there, so I did.
Well, I can explain it. Patty was passing on the information.
That's exactly right.
I needed to know. She couldn't get to me, and Sue's...
You wouldn't listen to her.
Well, maybe.
It's nothing new.
And now, to get into that, to get into contact with, I was telling Pops outside, I know the icy grip. I've felt that creepy icy feeling all over my body more than once in life, where I know I'm in the presence of something that is just not right or good. Whether it's walking into a room of people and knowing, like, I really don't need to be here.
Well, it's really interesting. There's actually a chapter in the book about that, how different entities appear to you a different way. And with one of them, the incident I bring up in the book was with a client of mine. I've had the benefit of 40 years being the top hairdresser in every salon I've been in, and I've only been in 2 for an extended period of time, and I'm talking over 10 years.
Yeah.
This one over 16 years. So I've met an enormous amount of people coming through my chair, and they've all told me some incredible stories, and a lot of them aren't even in the book. But this one was interesting because she told me that we were talking about this chapter of the book, and I told her where I was, telling her about my progress. And she said she had this taste of strawberries in her mouth driving home from work one day. And she loves strawberries. She said, but I hadn't eaten them in months. It was like January. Strawberries are so out of season. I didn't have any. And then she remembered later that was the day. I don't know if it was when she went to bed, went to set her alarm, but realized that was the day her sister had been murdered. Oh, wow. 12 years prior, and her sister's favorite snack in the whole world was strawberries. And so she firmly believes that was her sister getting hold of her. And I said, and when somebody comes to your mind, like a lot of times I'll have thoughts of these people that I went to grade school with, and I don't want to give his name out, but I had one, and I called my sister Mary Jane, and I said, do you ever see this family anymore? She's still in Akron and still very active socially, works for the public school district. And she said, Sue, he died in a car accident like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Speeding out on Route 8. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I thought, well, he came into my mind so I can offer prayers for him. There's an interesting program on several years ago. I don't know if it's still on or not. It might be. But it was about the afterlife. And this gentleman who had coded in the operating room and went to the other side. And that was what the program was about, were these people that crossed over and came back.
Yeah.
They died as far as the physical body dying. And he said that he could actually feel the prayers being offered for him when he died. And he could hear his wife's voice praying for him and see them. She had met with several people in the lobby of this hotel, it was like a hotel, but it was a hospital where they have like hotel waiting lobbies for families of trauma patients that are going to be there for extended periods. And she didn't even know. She called her son and several people from church and was singing and praying in the lobby and didn't even know her husband had passed away. And he was pronounced dead and gone for over 30 minutes, I want to say. And came back to tell the story and was on this program talking about it. Wow. But how he could actually feel the prayers. They sense the prayers. It's still a relationship regardless. Marianne Winkowski's book, I actually love reading her stuff. She's written several, but the most popular I think that everybody would recognize was The Ghost Whisperer.
Yep.
She's a good Cleveland girl like myself, good Italian girl. And she sees people. I don't have that gift. She can see them, but I've known when there were people present at their funerals. I can't see them. I'm more like you where I sense it. Yeah. Sometimes they'll come to me in a dream. They'll ask me to say things to people, to tell people certain stories. Yeah. One of our girlfriends we know, Edie Corrigan, she's a singer here, local singer, and beautiful gal. Her husband had passed away, and they had been separated and living apart for years, but neither one of them had remarried. And for some reason, this man came to me. I didn't even realize it was her husband. I don't know her that well, except through Steve and I going out to karaoke. And she happened to be there, and we got to talking about the paranormal and the book, and I told her, she said, well, my ex-husband died, and da-da-da, we were talking about that, and she said, showed me a picture of him. And I'm like, he's the guy that was in my dream. He'd come in, and she goes, you've seen him? And I said, yeah, I've seen him twice, and I was trying to match him. Why am I having this dream about this person with such angular features? I kept trying to fit him into somebody I knew. Yeah. And yet I didn't know him until she showed me that photograph, and he was wearing the same tan color wool long coat, and it was him. And I said, he said something about take care of my dog is the message that I got to give you. And Edie, I thought she was going to fall out of her chair, and she goes, her daughter was there. Their daughter was there. And she said, tell her what happened. Well, her daughter was at the house. After her husband died, they moved into the big house that he lived in by himself. She and her daughter moved to a smaller apartment. They were pretty much living hand to mouth. And when he passed away, they moved into the big house. Of course, she was a wife. It was her house. And her daughter was taking a shower one night, and the water completely cut off in the shower. And she said, Mom, quit messing with me. Turn the shower on. Well, Edie couldn't hear because she was in a different part of the mansion, right? And her daughter, it happened, I think, twice when she was showering. And she got out and she goes, I just wish you wouldn't mess with me. And somehow or another, she told her mother about this thing. And her father had come to her in a dream the night before, too, and told her something about taking care of the dog. And they never owned a dog. And it was really interesting that the daughter got the same message, the exact same message that I got. And Edie said, when I told her I haven't been turning the water off, I don't know what's causing that. She's like, it's got to be Dad. I'm not paying attention to him. I haven't been praying for him, But it was really weird because she goes, I don't know what the hell he's talking about with this dog. I said, I don't either. I'm telling you what I saw and what I was told. And that was interesting because his daughter got the exact same message from him. So there's sometimes things happen with the paranormal and I have no flipping clue what they mean. And then there's other times where it's like very definitive. The ghost at my sister's house, I believe that woman wanted her out. Well, and Marianne's a real good believer in that, and she brought it up, I thought, eloquently so many times.
Because that's one of the stories in the book, House Guests and Ghosts, Very True Stories of the Paranormal by Susan Mariani, our guest here. Tell us a little bit, which chapter is that in the book? And tell us a little bit about the story.
The story about Cecilia's ghost is in particularly, and that is an entire email that Celia wrote to me. We really don't talk about the paranormal with her much anymore.
Okay.
But I believe that the ghost of hers, through research, found out that the woman that owned this and the way Celia described her, her home was built in 1956. And it was a farmhouse. And back in that day, Copley was a community that didn't have many center stair colonials. They were older farmhouse. It was a farming community and was up until the 70s. And now it's become suburbia, a lot of real high-end houses out there.
Sure.
But the people that were original, including this woman and her husband, moved into this beautiful center stair colonial, had it built, and it sat on acreage, and there were orchards and the archway you walk through to get into the pathway, and a French garden onto the house, and a little sitting area right outside the house. Yes, sweetheart. So it was... Celia's ghost didn't want her there. Yeah. I don't think that she felt... She did many things to terrify her and scare her out of the house, which she ultimately did.
Well, and get into some of that, because, our readers our listeners haven't had a chance to read the book yet.
Well, that's why they have to get it. They got to get all these stories.
Give them, not all of them, of course not, but give us a little bit about one of them here. What were some of the things that she experienced, after the home was built?
Well, there were different things that happened right after they moved in and are still, evidently, according to the new owner, still happening with that house. The ghost is still present there. My brother...
How did they come to find that it was a spirit in the home to begin with? Like, what sort of things were happening?
Well, they were a young family, and she had very small children in diapers, her first and second born, and went to lay the baby in the crib, the child would be terrified sometimes of going to bed. Celia would insist, like most mothers, that you lay in your crib, and we're talking about a child that's many months old, if not maybe 18 months, 15 months old.
Sure.
So at that age, you have to get them to learn to be independent, sleep on their own.
Yeah.
And she heard a shot go off. She didn't know what it was, but she said she sounded, it was maybe a baseball bat hitting a wooden surface. And it terrified her. She said, I immediately dropped to the ground thinking somebody was firing through the window, gunfire through the window.
Yeah.
Of course, my baby's in the crib, but she's below the sill level. So she gets up and grabs the baby out of the crib. And I guess it happened again. She called the police because I don't remember the intricacies of the story, but the policeman said, well, maybe somebody was throwing something at the window, a neighbor kid, an apple, and there was nothing below the window or in the yard. They checked. She felt really foolish. And he said, well, a cat could have jumped off. And she said, this was typical of my family. With all due respect, officer, you would have had to have thrown the cat against my window to make that kind of sound.
Yeah.
It was incredibly intense. Water would turn off in faucets. Doors would slam shut. Her daughters went upstairs to bathe. She sent them up to take a bath, clean up one day. And this was pretty much the final straw. She heard rustling on the stairs and screaming, and the girls ran down the stairs so quickly that they were coming down on their bottoms, almost tripping over each other to get down the stairs, and literally clung to her, flesh tearing, clinging to her. And she said, what is it? Thinking one of them had maybe gotten electrocuted.
Yeah.
Blow dryer too close to the, shock, not electrocuted. And she said, I just got this really cold chill. Anyhow, Megan told her that the lady was upstairs. And when she took on this woman's voice, Celia said the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I became furious. It's like, how dare you? So she went upstairs with the girls, much to their protest. They're clinging at her. And her husband was out of town frequently for work. And I believe this was one of those days he's out of town. So you got to muster up the intestinal fortitude to go up there and fight that ghost for your kids.
Sure.
Whether you want to or not.
If that's what it is, it could
Put
be.
Put your depends on there and get in and fight.
No matter what it is, it just scared two independent kids at the same time.
Yeah, and they finally, Celia said, I went upstairs and I looked at the door, and my husband and my brother John, who's this built ball player, neither one of them could close the door. And she said, who closed this bedroom door? And one of her young daughters said, I did, Mommy. I didn't want to see her anymore. And it was horrible. And as Celia was leaving the house, that was it. She's packed up and she's gone. There were many, many other things that happened in the house.
Sure.
Objects being moved, doors slamming, like I said. My mother went up. She got the nickname Dr. Vinkman for going up for Celia. And, of course, with her sacramental, because you don't dare try and call them out without having God there as your backup. We're powerless in that realm. God is all powerful in that realm. So Celia moved out of the house, and she said, as we had the last of everything out, like I said, there were many other stories in there, but she went to pull the door closed, and she said, I looked up at the top of the stairs, and there she stood. She said, I just looked at her and said, wow, you're just as ugly as my daughter said you would. It's all yours. She walked out and never went back.
Right?
I think there's two stories in this book that are most compelling for me.
Which ones are those by?
The first story should be is the synopsis of Vince from first seeing the ghost through the time that he tells you.
Yeah.
The second part of the book that I find most compelling is when Paul, the 26-year-old autistic son, at the time is 10
or 11.
10 or 11, goes missing on the beach out in
Topsail Island,
Topsail
North
Island.
Carolina.
Those two stories, you should give a quick synopsis of those two stories.
Well, we'll start at the beginning then, because that's when Vince first came to me and told me that he had this ghost. When I would hear him, he and his dad and I both would hear one-sided conversations in his room. And I was told by his pediatrician that that's also a sign, developing imaginary friends, a sign of high intelligence. Mm-hmm. So I didn't pay too much attention to it until I was making dinner one evening, and Vince, I told him, I asked who he was talking to. And he told me Bacon later on, but he said, Mom, I said, well, tell him to wash up for dinner. And as he passed me, he said, Mom, ghosts don't eat. Very quietly. And it really startled me. And I said, well, when I asked him, what's your friend's name? He said his name's Bacon. That's all he told. That's all I knew, was that he had this imaginary friend named Bacon. And sometimes he actually told my mother that he was terrified, that Bacon did terrify him at night and had come to talk to him all the time. And he didn't want him to come into his room anymore, but he couldn't stop him from coming in either.
Every night at 11, was that?
He was about 4 or 5 years old at the time. And it wasn't until Vince was 21 years old. He was actually living here, watching the kids, so I could go up for my brother Steve's wedding. It's my youngest brother. And Vince stayed here as an adult. He was 20-something at the time. And in 2001, he would have been 23. Math was not my strong suit. Anyhow, he watched the kids. I went up for Steve's wedding and came back, and we're swapping stories. Well, when I was up there, my brother Dave, I don't know how to describe Dave except to say he's a unique individual.
An Italian eccentric.
He's an asshole. He's an ass. He's a paisan.
We love you.
Dave is my guardian
Extend
angel.
that love.
He's my oldest brother. He's my biggest ally and my greatest friend. I love him to death.
And I've never caught him being an asshole to me.
Dave is real low key though, and he's a real ass. But he's one of those guys you can't help but laugh, even though he's an ass.
Yeah.
He's a funny guy.
I like him already.
Yeah. And he's telling me. He starts off the story with, by the way, did anybody tell you I saw a ghost at Burton? And I said, no. And he tells me the story about seeing this ghost. And I'm like, you're not shit. I mean, you can tell, by the way, Dave's very nonplussed by everything. If he can't feel, if it's not tactile and it doesn't have breasts that are quite abundant, he doesn't want anything to do with them. So anyhow, Dave tells me, he says, well, yeah, she appeared. I was taking a shower for work, and he wanted to do it in the basement of this house that I owned, this Burton house. That's where Vince was a little guy. And Dave was living on the 3rd floor. It had been subdivided, each floor, into apartments, individual apartments. Well, Dave was on the very top floor. And he says, and I was walking up the stairs because I didn't want to mess up the bathroom up there or wake up my wife. So I went down the basement, take a quick shower. I'm on my way up. And he was smoking a cigarette. And he said, and I looked up when I got to the very top landing before you get into it's actually the 2nd story of the house. And he's coming up those stairs, and he said, there's this woman standing at the top of the stairs. She's got shoulder-length brown hair and a white nightgown. And she's just staring at me. And then as I look up, she turns around and starts walking away from me down the hallway. And it's probably 20 feet down this hallway. He said, well, I look down, and I'm thinking, and this was my brother Dave, I'm quoting here, what the fuck? My wife doesn't have brown hair. That's not my fucking wife, but I have no idea. I'm okay with 2 women. He's got all these thoughts running around in his sick, twisted head, and he gets to the top of the stairs and
2 chicks, all right. Hey.
And she's just, I could tap that. Yeah, that's my brother. I'd tap that. So she stares at him for a minute, and then he said, and he held up his cigarette. He said, the smoke off the end of my cigarette. She was gone. She just dissipated, just like that. But honest to God, when she was there, it was like She was another human being. She was that solid.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. So I'm listening. I said, what did you do? He said, I actually thought I shit myself. I had to reach around and check because I really did think I shit myself, and I'd have to
Just
go down and take
couldn't move
another
or feel
shower.
it, yeah.
He was terrified and called a priest, and the priest did not take it lightly. He came up, well, when I got performed a blessing on the house and talked to Dave, gave him some instruction. Well, when I got back from Akron, I was talking to Vince. Of course, we're having a cigarette and a beer out on the front patio, and he's telling me about what happened when I was gone, and I'm filling him in on the wedding and things that happened with the family. And I said, and it's really funny. Dave told me he saw a ghost at Burton. And Vince laughed, let out a laugh. He says, I'd love to see him get the shit scared out of him, He says, I wish I could have been there. And I said, it really scared him. He goes, who do you see, Bacon or his daughter? I mean, just like that. And I said, well, he saw the ghost of a woman. He goes, yeah, brown hair. Describes her to me. Like an eyeless pattern nightgown she wears, or maybe underwear. I don't know what it is. And I said, yeah. He goes, she's always around the back stairwell. That's where she likes to be. He goes, that's where she died in a fire. And he told me about a fire. And then he expands it to say there's no deed on that house between 1856 and 1917, which I'd already researched and found out that was true. And in the book, I actually brought up the only map I could find, and I couldn't find any with Samuel Bacon's name on it. But when I researched the deed for that property, it was the Samuel Bacon allotment. It still is to this day. So when I was, when I was down, and my sister Celia,
little kid's friend's name is Bacon, y'all.
Yeah, and Bacon is actually the Samuel Bacon allotment. It's the Crestview Estates. They're still, or Crestland Estates is what it is.
Well, now, because the book is called House Guests and Ghosts, and it's because quite a few of the stories have to do with your family, have to do with familial connection,
absolutely,
things like that. What do you recall being your first paranormal experience? When do you recall that?
That's really interesting because I didn't bring this up in the book, and we were still living at the Greenwood house, which I recall in great detail many instances at the Greenwood house, and we left there. Which is
where?
That was the house my parents first moved into when they moved from Pennsylvania to Akron, so my father could get a job with the rubber companies, which back in the 50s was coveted work. Working for one of the big rubber companies.
My father worked for Cooper Tire and Rubber my whole life. So
there you go.
More than familiar with the town.
Exactly. And so we lived in Akron, and I loved Akron. I loved growing up. Went to St. Sebastian School, West Side girl. And I forget where we were going with this story. You asked me something about
your first experience.
When we were on Greenwood. We moved from there in the middle of my kindergarten year, and I remember my mother was wearing a suit that she had. It was navy and white with a real broad collar on it, wool, navy skirt. My sister Mary Jane still owns that suit. Beautiful. And I actually had an out-of-body experience. I found out I didn't know my mother was going to the Click store, which is like a Kmart, I guess, make that correlation. But it was a Click store, and I used to love to go there because on the way out, she would let us either have a pony ride or gum from the gumball machine. So It was a real treat to go to the store with her and be well behaved and be rewarded for that. Well, I went to Mother, and she was crying, and I didn't know at the time why she was crying, but I remember hugging her neck and my hands going through her neck. And I realized that I wasn't really with my mom physically, that my mom was there and I was a spirit with her. And I kept trying to console her. And it wasn't until I was adult, I was just a little kid. And Mother had some major medical issues that I didn't even realize till I was an adult. And I don't know if it was my spirit in the form, spirit, my true spirit, was there to console my mother.
Out-of-body experience.
Yeah. Well, I had another one after I moved to Dallas, and I called my mother. This is flash forward, 30 years.
Sure.
And I'm down here, and much to the chagrin of many of my family, they did not want me moving at all. And I needed a fresh start. I need to get out of this brutal cold weather of Akron. I don't like the brutal cold of Dallas in the winter,
Yeah, the brutal cold.
Yeah, the brutal cold. It was 51 here today. Yeah. It's still brutally cold
brutal.
for me.
It's brutal.
I know.
It's tough, y'all.
I got real thin skin once I moved down here, I gotta tell you. And
That was your first time.
her father actually came to see me, Chauncey Genevieve, and took me back home, and I asked him, I said, how is my mom? And he said, she's fine. Come with me. And I had another out-of-body experience. And the next day I called my mom. I could only call my mother maybe once a month when I first moved here. I was so broke. We were so incredibly broke. I mean, $3 extra on your phone bill.
Yeah.
That was unreal. But I thought, it's cheaper than a flight home. I'm going to call my mother once a month. And so I called her and I asked her if she'd fallen asleep in the recliner the night before. And was she wearing her navy blue suit with her cream blouse to the office that day? And she just got really tired. And she said, she got really quiet, And she said, who showed you? She immediately knew. My mother knew. We knew each other. She was my friend, not just my mom.
Sure.
And she still contacts me. She still tells me things and helps me with problems. But I said, your dad did. And she said, yeah, I fell asleep in front of the television last night, woke up about 3 a.m. I said, Greg was laying on the floor watching TV, wasn't he? Yep, gray sweatpants. And she's like, you were here. You heard, that's exactly the way it was last night. I painted the picture. I'd been down here for months. at that point. So there were many things. I remember standing in the front patio at Simon Perkins. I couldn't go into a place, whether it was the Civic Theater is incredibly active with paranormal. And we would go there every year to see the Nutcracker, the Akron Symphony. There was a lot of culture growing up for me, and I remember feeling the spirits when they were there. That was interesting, and at Simon Perkins as well. And there have been documented cases of spirits at Simon Perkins since I saw a group of kids playing stickball in the front yard. And I was told by my brownie instructor, you need to come over here. And I was like, they don't have to come over here. It's just like there's nobody there. So there were other people that saw it, but I don't think she thought anything of it,
Yeah.
There's nobody over there. And I'm like, well, the other kids get to play out there. She's like, no, they don't. There's no one over there.
Yeah.
So I've seen it before. And my sister has a wonderful photograph that she got. It's actually a video at Simon Perkins Mansion maybe 7 years ago. And one of the dolls that's in one of the room that I found out later was supposed to be very active with ethereal guests. The doll's head literally turned in the video. It just is a video, and in one photograph you just see the doll's face, and in the next part of the video you just see a blur. And she's actually still framed it, where the doll's head is actually whipping to the side as they were going out of the room.
Wow.
She said, my skin crawled. I'm never going back there. I don't want
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I meant earlier by the icy cold hand that I was talking about, that I told Pops that I've felt in my life. I've definitely, of course, had my close connection with God in life, and I've learned what His presence feels like. At least my understanding of God, my spiritual view of God. I've learned to realize when that is at work in a moment, and when it's happening, and that's a great blessing. But with that also comes the keen awareness of the opposite side, comes the keen awareness that there is something else. Because it is a matter of faith. It is a matter of believing something other than yourself, believing in something other than the here, the now.
Right. There is something beyond. We're called to a higher purpose.
Well, we are. And some people think that purpose is utterly temporal. Only has to do with right here, right now. And I can understand that. I can perfectly understand that. My burden of knowledge brings me to a different place of understanding, though, and that's it. That's just my understanding. That's where I've come to through my realm of experience, and I know my first experience was probably when, and it wasn't even a warm experience, and it was far before I ever remember us going to church or anything like that. We didn't go to church, at least on a regular basis that I know of, until I was at least a good 7 years old, something like that. And my recollection goes back before that, and it's one of the only memories that I have of a trailer house that we lived in. And I remember looking out, there's a swing set, and I remember looking out and seeing a dark figure that was waving to me, kind of like, "Hey, come here."
Oh,
Through
so
the
he was
window.
waving you to come with him.
It was like, no.
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 How old were you when this happened?
I had to have been 4, something like that. It's literally one of my earliest recollections from childhood.
And it's really interesting.
Vividly.
I believe
I have goosebumps right now even thinking
talking
about
it
that vividly.
Right.
And like I said, I've learned to realize through my life when my concept of God is working in the universe, when my concept of good is happening. And because of that, I've also become keenly aware of when the concept of the opposite of that has come into play in my life. And it was definitely at moments where, much like tradition tells us, where, much like in Lost Boys, the vampire can't come in until you invite him through the window. Yeah. Unfortunately, most of our demons, quote unquote demons, folks, attach themselves to us through our own action, through our own actual invitation.
Well, they have
and that's
to be,
kind
and
of
that's the gift of the free
danger.
will.
Yeah.
Which separates us from the plants out there and the plankton out there.
Sure.
But our free will doesn't go away in death. We still have that beautiful gift of free will.
Absolutely.
And so...
Well, and that's where, once again, the concept of faith comes into play. And that's why I predicated this conversation on the fact of you have to, and why I asked you to define your concept of the paranormal. Because most of the time, whenever I ask people that, it comes down to faith. Mm-hmm. And I don't care if it's Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, it doesn't matter. Most of the people that I know of that believe in the paranormal, believe in these things, and have experienced them, stuff like that, most of them tend to have some sort of faith background.
Right,
or faith basis in their life.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just they have a concept of faith. They have a concept of believing in something other than themselves.
Right.
Whether or not they go to church every Sunday, it doesn't matter.
No, and my thing is it's more of a spirituality, and we got into the talk earlier, the difference between
absolutely
the spirituality,
the religion being what you do in a building with people of like mind, the spirituality being what you do with that teaching out in the real world.
Exactly.
How you live the message.
Exactly, and it's I think there is absolutely a need for the community of faith.
Most definitely.
As far as the structure and people meeting together and supporting each other. And then that spirituality is what we do privately in our talks with God and our talks. the other part of this book, and that's what beautifully you led into that, is when my son was 11 and being autistic, he was lost at the beach. You can imagine any parent that's had their child lost at the beach. Yeah. It's a terrifying feeling.
Yeah, it's not a mall, man. There aren't walls.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know. A mall could. I'm terrified of humans.
A mall's terrifying to begin with, but at least there are walls and doors that maybe they won't figure out.
Humans are really confused.
But when you're at the beach, you're talking tides, you're talking water, you're talking
things that are so far beyond
cars, sand dunes, ways to wander off that nobody will see you, things like that. There are very few security cameras there are more security cameras at beaches now, but not when your 27-year-old was 11. Not by far.
No, not that many. We were actually at a family reunion, so I was blessed to have my entire family there. And once we'd realized, and I get into the book how he became missing and our search for him, part of that search, it had to be cut short because my daughter would not leave my side. And she was starting to dehydrate. So I had to get her back. And I thought of, if I continued to look for Paul, it's at Elizabeth's peril. And yet, if I take care of Elizabeth...
It's at Paul's peril.
Right. Yeah. And that decision, it was so agonizing. And I actually had another girl tell me after she read the book, contacted me. I did not know her. And she read my book on Amazon and contacted me through my email, which is on the back of the book. She told me I had to put the book down. I couldn't even read through that without crying, that chapter on the book, how devastated that must have been for you. I said, yeah, it was, but I had this beautiful family out searching for him, and a woman stopped me and just told me, nobody had been abducted in that island, and she'd lived there for 28 years. And I couldn't understand why did you even talk abduction. It was with my brother and sister-in-law, who were the only ones that weren't accounted for at the beach. So that made me feel a lot better. She'd seen him with a couple.
Sure.
And described Paul to a T. I mean, what he was wearing, his eye and hair color. She says, oh, Paul, right? And I'm like, now she's hit the nail on the head. She'd give me his name. And she said, well, he went to run into the waves, and I thought it was one of my young ones. She was watching 5 children, all under the age of 5. And she said, so I was surprised to see a boy his age. And he was chasing the shorebirds back into the ocean. And they called to him, Paul, come with us. Don't go in the water. So he ran up, took each of them by the hand. He's between a man and a woman. And I said, he has kind of a big couple. My brother Greg's, his nickname's Hoss. Dan Blocker, my brother Greg, big guy. And I'm sorry, she said. And I said, well, the woman, long blonde hair, maybe up in a ponytail, visor. She goes, I said, blonde. She could not tell me whether they were fat, thin, black, white, blonde, brunette. She could not describe this couple he was with at all. But she told me my son had blonde hair and blue eyes and was wearing a shirt with a fish on it from Cozumel. Trunks to match. I'm like, same colors? Yeah. I mean, she saw Paul with this couple. So I'm thinking, okay, Greg and Stephanie have him, thank God. And I go back with Elizabeth feeling much relieved. My brother John said, I'm going to continue on down to the pier. He said, sis, I just get her back. I'll see you in a bit. I'm going to run down to the pier and I'll hitch a ride. Okay, because the pier was, I want to say 4 miles down the beach. It might have been just 2 miles. I forget. I'd have to look at my book, find out. Anyhow, he gets back, and when I got back to the hotel, we were about an equidistance from the pier to the hotel. So I'm going this way, and John's coming this way. And when I got there, my sister Mary Jane's talking to me. Mom's giving me water, and I'm telling him he's with Greg and Stephanie. We found him, blah, blah, blah. And my sister Mary Jane came up and took me by the hand, and she said, honey, we need to talk to the police chief. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, he's right over here. My cousin Jim walks up and says, I need to talk to you real quick. And I said, Jim, I got to talk to the police chief. This is cool. Paul's with Greg and Stephanie. He goes, I need to talk to you, Sue. And he took me by the shoulders and sat me down on a bench that was right there behind me. And he said, Greg and Stephanie left for Wilmington shopping this morning. They don't have Paul. And it was like somebody literally kneed me in the sternum, took my breath completely away. And I said, then who does? And my sister Mary Jane patted my hand. She said, honey, that's what the police chief wants to talk to you about. You need to come with me. I was in such a state of shock. He was asking me questions, and it was like things were going by me at super fast speed, you know, almost like light. And at one point, I kept looking at my sister Mary Jane. She was my touchstone. And he'd ask me questions like, do you have photographs of your son, Paul? And I look at Jane. I had a whole video camera full. I was videotaping the kids on the beach that morning when he went missing. So yes, I got. But my first thought is, who in the hell brings a photo album to a beach? You know? And then he said, well, where do you live? And the third question, and I said, on Angela Drive in Cedar Hill. And then Jane shot out the address of my home there on the beach, on the island that week. And he asked me a third question, and I said, is he just trying to piss me off, Jane? And she goes, honey, just no. And she told him, she explained, my sister is evidently in shock. Could we just give this a minute? And I looked this way when she said that. There's helicopter pilots ready to go out. Then he starts telling me, the police chief, about this boy that went missing 6 days ago and still is in intensive care. And that was the question. He said, well, would your son recognize your house? And I'm like, is he trying to piss me off? I said, my son doesn't realize he's missing.
Yeah.
My son is autistic. Did he not get the memo? You know, I'm like, why is this man aggravating me so much? And he said the helicopter goes up after this many hours, and he says, ma'am, I just want you to know, we've closed all bridges to the island. Nobody's on or off this island until we find that boy. So he'd gotten word, too, that he was seen with a couple. This couple has Paul now. So now they're looking for a kidnapping.
Yeah.
I was amazed at the number of people who went from door to door, people firing up boats. My nephew Mark said this guy fired up his boat when I told him about Paul being missing. And that thing probably eats more gas than I make in a month, you know, and he didn't think anything of it. Got a boy missing, I'm out to sea. The jet skis were out there. The police had already formed a barricade at the mouth of Topsail Island. You couldn't get on or off that island without the police knowing about it. But then, you know, it comes from search and recovery to search and rescue to search and recovery. Yeah. And I knew that's what the helicopter was doing. Well, right then, Greg and Stephanie pulled up. And I just saw my brother's mouth go, what the fuck? And he looked around. I mean, there's ambulances. There's a helicopter in the damn hotel parking lot. Fatigue's there. It was one of the most unbelievable days of my life. The most traumatic event of my life. And my Aunt Dolores at this point came up to me. I was sitting there my mom kept feeding me water. God love her. And my Aunt Dolores came up to me and she said, honey, I can't walk. She was wheelchair bound at the time. And she said, but I formed a prayer chain. And I get real emotional talking about this because it was very profound. She said, I've asked our blessed Lord to send angels to take him somewhere safe and protect him until we find him. And I said, Aunt Dee, that's all fine, well, and good, but right now, I need boots on the ground. And I'm going to be boots on the ground. And I dismissed her immediately. And I saw the look of hurt on her face. She's since forgiven me. We laugh about it now. Yeah. I was a big itch. Because she won't say that other word. But she was so cute. Richard, my cousin, felt compelled to go to the pier. He said, I'm like, Dad, I need the keys. He goes, do you believe he wanted me to run up there? I'm like, give me the keys. I'm driving up. And when he went to go out, a woman there said, are you looking for Paul? And described the same pretty much Same story he got on the pier that I got on the beach. That Paul was trying to run away, and they're like, no, come with us. Well, when Richard found him, he was sitting under the pier in the shade, in the sand, throwing rocks at shorebirds and just kind of writing in the sand and putting his hand over it. And there was another young man there. My cousin said he looked to be about 13 years old. And just to give you a little background on Richard, he used to work with what they call the throwaway children in New York and Philadelphia. So he's very educated in the juvenile mind.
Sure.
With a degree in psychology, and he taught special ed in Trenton for years as well, just retired from there. And I got to just plug real quick, his kids took state championship in chess. State champions in chess from Rich Genevieve. And he got to Paul, he asked this young man, about 13-year-old, he said, how long has this boy been here? And the kid says, as long as I've been here. Which tells you nothing if you think about it. He goes, well, did you see who brought him here? And he goes, dude, he's been alone the whole time. And Rich said, knowing teenagers the way I do, I knew I couldn't push this kid much further.
Yeah.
So he said, great. Well, he picks Paul up. Paul sees him. Hi, he's all excited. He goes to Richard. Well, John was running down the beach. And he sees this man. He finally got eyes on Paul. But he's still about a block out, a couple, 200 yards out. But he sees Paul there and he's got him. He said, like I said, John's like this. I got him in my scope, man. I'm ready to go. And I see this man bend down and pick him up. And I didn't know it was Richard. He goes, I just thought I was tired after a 2-mile run on this beach in the middle of the hot sun. He said, man, I picked up the pace, and it was like, you son of a bitch, put him down. He said, I'm screaming the whole way there, and Rich is like, no, John, it's me, it's all good. So they got back, and everything worked out, and then we started telling the stories about Richard's woman seeing him with this couple, and the police chief. Actually, the police chief wanted me checked out. Paul was fine. He didn't even have an elevated body temp. He was gone for almost 2 hours on the beach. And he said, check her out, check her vitals. I'm like, I'm not going to fall out. My mom's here. I can't do that to her. But my Aunt Dolores walked up to me and she said, well, remember I asked our blessed Lord to send angels to take him somewhere safe. And that's exactly what he did. Can't describe a guardian angel.
Yeah.
She said, why do you even bother praying if you don't believe he's going to answer your prayers? And it changed the way I felt about life. It changed the way I felt about prayer. She said, just don't even bother. He answers prayers all the time.
Yeah.
And he did for Paul. There was no other explanation for this couple.
Well, and it's once again, it's a matter of having to be open-minded enough to see something outside of your realm, to see a prayer answered. Because unfortunately, most people see prayers as wishes.
Exactly.
And they see prayers as a granting of a wish.
They see Jesus as a great genie.
Like I used to have to explain to my junior high students. You can believe me. I tried it. You can try to pray to Jesus all day long to help you pass algebra.
But if you
unless
don't
you study your math, he ain't gonna miracle your ass through algebra. That ain't how it works. So, on that note, as we wrap things up, it's been a great conversation about the paranormal, about your journey to the making of this book, some of the stories inside of the book, house guests and ghosts, very true stories of the paranormal by our guest, Susan Mariani, and a couple of things shared by Pops Davis here in the background, as always. Tell us where people can go to get this book. And where they can go to contact you with their own stories, Susan.
They can contact me with their stories. I prefer they be written at smtaylorart@yahoo.com. And that's on the back of the book.
Yep.
You can order the book through Amazon. And if you order the book, I've also set it up that you get the free Kindle device. You can buy the Kindles separately, and they're the same price.
Oh, wow.
Right now, I have got the book at a special price of $5.
That's great.
I would also like to say, so if you buy the paperback version, you will get the Kindle free. If you buy the Kindle version, you don't get a free paperback, though. I wanted to make that clear.
Absolutely.
But it's available at Amazon and Kindle. And 100% of the proceeds are going for a fund that I started for Paul's Place, which is a home for the mentally infirmed, and especially those adults suffering with autism that need permanent round-the-clock care.
And I have personally spent the day with the amazing Paul, and just such a world of joy.
He truly is
that they live in,
honest joy.
Well, and it's like we've been saying, the whole concept of spirituality, the whole concept of faith is learning to process information in a different way, and it's learning to get past the ego of self and really dig down into something that is ultimately, when it comes down to it, the most foreign, alien concept in the world to a human being, and that is to surrender, to fully surrender to something other than yourself, to something other than your own ego.
Humility, buddy.
And
it takes a lot.
And I made the Lenten promise years ago, and told one of my confirmation students who I was sponsoring, he was like, "Oh, what are you giving up for Lent?" Because I was like, "Coke, really, dude? You're giving up soda? Come on, bro. Like, you hit the nail a little harder, man. Like, get it in the wood. Let's make it happen." And he's like, "Oh, what are you giving up?" I'm like, "I'm giving up being judgmental." And he's like, "Well, that's easy." I'm like, "Do it tonight, one night, tonight, 3 hours during youth night. I want you to give up being judgmental. I don't want you to think a single thing about a person whenever they walk in the room, about how they smell, how they look, about what they're saying. Nothing. Prejudge nobody about anything. I want you to do that for me tonight." And he came up to me at the end of the night and he was like, "Dude, that's really, really hard.
That is so
difficult. That is so hard. Like, soda is so entirely simple." And what was funny was, at the time, we had 2 autistic students that came every week to youth group. One of them was James Barber. I've talked about him on the show before. I trained him as an altar server. He had one of the most beautiful, deep spiritualities and connections with God that I've ever seen. And somebody that when he prayed with intent and with beautiful intent. And it was absolutely amazing. And much like spirituality and faith are a different way of processing the world around us, so is autism. It's literally just, it is, I choose to not see it as deficiency. I choose to see it as the fact that we are actually deficient.
Right.
We are the ones that have the hang up, bro. Mm-hmm. We're the ones that can't get past certain things, and that you can't just see the world in a simplistic, beautiful, innocent point of view every day when we wake up.
And the difference is, though, there is that real violent side to certain autistic individuals that come out.
There are, and it's normally a clash of reality.
Medication is okay.
It's a clash of reality, is what it is, and it's a clash of, like I was saying earlier. I get the same way. I take anxiety meds, man. You ask my wife. The 35-minute line that we waited in to get from here to your door at TSA at Christmas time, like, I almost passed out in the airport. Straight up, my brain could not deal with that much information being processed at the same time. It's a log jam. It just happens. Wow. And, like, I don't have what the scientific or documented medical community would say is a mental deficiency. Whereas they say that's a mental deficiency, and all it is a totally different way of processing information, a totally different way of looking at the world around us, and they get overloaded in a different way than we do.
Right.
You can't say that your system doesn't go overload during a day.
Well, and I told one of
as a regular balanced person,
right?
You go through
people
overload.
at the group home where he resides. One of the supervisors called, and Paul was very aggressive that day, spitting on the driver, and that's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
You don't treat other people that way.
Yeah.
But he does become aggressive at times, and she said he was throwing things and being very disruptive. And I thought about this for a minute, and I called her back, and I said,
What
if
happened?
anybody is available, take him for a walk. I found that usually happens when there's fear.
Yeah.
If he's very fearful,
Yeah.
he will become aggressive. That's another chapter in the book when he encountered a ghost at my sister Joan's house. And the funny thing is, house guests and ghosts, it's that double meaning, which is a lot of my work. But I was a house guest at many of the occurrences when they happen. And then, of course, the ghosts are guests in your home as well. Or
Sure.
they consider you the guest in their home.
Exactly.
It is
what
their
I was just
home.
about to say. They were there a long time before you were, my
we
friend.
got here.
Yeah. One more time, tell us where we can go to get the book, and tell us about Paul's Place.
Paul's
Hey, there's
Place
Paul.
is a group home for Paul, and here he is now.
Hey,
Good
Paul.
night, sweetheart. Can you say bye-bye to everybody?
Good night, my buddy.
Okay, and here's Paul. Paul's Place is a group home that I would like to open where autistic individuals like Paul could get out and interact with animals,
Yeah.
like sheep. Thank you. And what other kind of animals would you like on your farm?
Cow.
A cow?
Cow?
Okay, we'll have cows on the farm, and what else?
Pig.
Pigs? Yeah, that sounds just like a pig. And I want him to be able to experience animals like rabbits.
Ha ha ha.
That's
Hop,
right.
hop, hop.
And horses.
Yoo-hoo.
He's been horse riding a couple times.
Oh,
Yeah.
Beautiful West Virginia horseback riding and Colorado horseback riding.
Oh.
But I want to also, I want to find a doctor for him that would be willing to experiment with medicinal marijuana for his seizures and his autistic behaviors, negative autistic behaviors,
Sure.
because there are no side effects like the very, very harsh side effects of the medications
Yeah.
that he's currently on that have put him in the hospital twice.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. Go to bed.
And and that's just it. There are numerous issues, especially with anti-seizure medications, things like that, with side effects. And when it comes to things like marijuana, even CBD treatment,
Right.
things like that, cannabinoid
Well, just to be
treatment.
open to it as opposed to, no, the pharmaceutical companies won't allow doctors to do that.
Yeah.
They're required to work within the parameters of the what is it, not the FTC,
The FDA.
FDA, thank you. And the medical community and the pharmaceutical companies, and I just feel that's outrageous when there has been enormous study and scientific research done. He's making a face at me that's making me laugh.
I know. I see
His
him in the
big
mirror.
eyes that cause they've done studies that show that it works on their behavior
Sure.
and on the seizures.
Well, and the the important thing is that we do realize that people need help. People in the world around us need help. That we remember that we were originally here as stewards of life.
That's
In
exactly
that
right.
great garden, that we were supposed to be taking care of the world around us. And the day that we stopped taking care of the world around us and started focusing on ourselves, suddenly we had to have a big angry angel with a flaming sword to keep us out of the place. and that's why you have gone through the effort over the last 16 years, not only to author this book, but to go through the effort to set things up with the proceeds from this book to help take care of people like your son, to help start a foundation, to help start a movement to be able to help people. And that is a beautiful thing. We're all about that here at Dudes and Beer. So, yeah, what's going on, buddy?
Absolutely.
Oh, good night.
Bye-bye, Paul.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, I guess that's a good sign-off note. He's saying bye-bye.
That's it. We had a good day. We had a lot of fun. We read some books.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It was most pleasurable being here, having you on the show, talking about this book that I've heard about for smooth the last 2 years. And that's 2 out of the last 16 of its creation, folks. Make sure to go to Amazon.com. Look for House Guests and Ghosts. Very true stories of the paranormal. Featuring stories with our friend Paul here in the background by Miss Susan Mariani. And look forward to more releases. I know you're busy illustrating a book for somebody right now.
Yes,
she is everywhere that you want to be artistically, folks. So make sure to go by and check her out. Paul, thank you so much for joining the show at the end.
Say
You're the
thank
best.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Take care, Pops.
See you later.
Good night. And
Cheers.
remember, everybody, if you can't be good at it. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast. To listen to our audio streams and chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for both Android and iDevices, available on the Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Spreaker, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.